Thank you for staying with us on the program Journalist Hangout. We're still talking about the industrial action by Labour, which has now been relaxed for 1 week for negotiations to continue. Labour says it's back to 494,000 naira, and government has said it is willing. The president is committed to paying a minimum wage that is higher than 60,000 naira. We do not know what the conclusion would be just yet, but then we hope that the negotiations would come up with something. But then we're talking about some of the limitations, what should not have been done even while the strike lasted on Monday, one of which was the shutting down of the national grid, which is yet to come back up in most parts of the country. I don't know, Jude, is there power supply in your home?
No, I don't even know what's going on now, but what I know is what I talked about earlier, that when you switch off, it takes some time, before you can get things back on. But these ones are behaving like enemies of Nigeria, so it's like they don't even care, It is clear in section 31, subsection 6 of the Trade Union Act that you cannot involve people in essential services in your strike. 31.6 says no person, trade union or employer shall take part in a strike or lockout or engage in any conduct in contemplation or furtherance of a dispute unless the person, the trade union or employer, is not engaged in the provision of essential services. Section 31.6. Except the person is not engaged in essential services. B6b says the strike or lockout concerns a labor dispute that constitutes a dispute, right? From the above provisions, there are 4 important conditions that workers in Nigeria must fulfill before they can embark on a lawful strike. The workers and their union must not be engaged in the provision of essential services. It's very clear. The union must have conducted a ballot at which a simple majority of all registered members voted to go on strike. And then I talked about South Africa. In South Africa, persons engaged in essential services are precluded from participating in any strike. But as an alternative to participation in a strike, such persons are compelled to refer their disputes to arbitration. It's so simple. Because the damage that you do to a country can be incalculable. You cannot restore what you have destroyed. You can't.
Absolutely not. So
this is why this issue is of concern to me. The president can pay 1 million as minimum wage if he thinks he can afford it. But no more, not again should we permit people to shut down the national grid.
All right, then. We'll wait to see how the National Security Advisor reacts to this. But actually, how hopeful are you about this week break that they're having? They are hoping that within this period, they're able to come up with something tangible.
Well, I think that, when you are a door, you see the outside and you see the inside. The government knows its own financial position. These have faced the financial position of the 36 states of the country and the 774 local governments of the country. Because the local government workers too are civil servants.
Yes.
So when you know that this is a country where we have never sat down to measure the productivity or worth of an average civil servant to know whether you deserve to earn a particular money or not. Yes, we have to earn a living wage, but we have to be realistic based on what we are making as a country. Like I said the other time, Nigeria is just struggling to make 1.9 million liters barrel per day against 2.5 million liters because our source of income is 90% basically oil export. Now, within the next 1 week, I want to see the labor being reasonable enough to assess the situation and to advise themselves to accept that one which is practicable. Because, mark you, go and write it down. After the federal government has said, we are still going to experience war in these 36 states of Nigeria. Because most of them will not be able to pay us and at when due.
And they are the majority.
Have a situation, what happened when Shagari was overthrown in 1983. As of December 31, 1983, there are some states out of the 19 states that cannot pay. About 7 states in Nigeria are owing salary for 12 months by the time Buhari took over. Go and check.
All right.
So we don't need a situation to go back to that level. Because if the president should say 100,000, 150,000, the state will be in strike for the next 2 years. or 3 years. They will not be able to afford it.
All right. Joining us via Zoom for more discussion on this issue is a lawyer and the lead partner at BKO Solicitors and Advocates, Justice Ojieno. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening to you. It's my pleasure joining you and to all our viewers all across the world.
Thank you. I'm sure you've been following developments regarding the strike. And in the course of that, we saw the national grid shut down. There have been discussions as to the legality of that action as a way of showing disaffection with, goings on in the country. So what is the legal angle to that? What does the law say about those actions, and what should be the limitations to industrial actions?
Okay, first, while discussing any conversation with respect to essential services, we'll start from Section 11 of our Constitution. And to a large extent, that also gives a rise to the provisions of the Trade Disputes Act that expressly, for the sake of national security, as abundantly illuminated by the great BKO and Mr. Baton on panel, it's for excellent reason. The nation cannot burn down. I fully am against the strategy employed by Labour in this situation, the cut-edge policy that they employed in order to be able to carry out whatever it is their particular end is. I will stop strongly before speculating, but I want to just say that there is more to it than meets the eye. The law is very, very clear that persons in essential services, even if even they want to protest, or they want to even as much as be absent from work for any particular reason, they have to do a notice of 15 days. Not just them, even other persons who are not in essential services, there must be a notice of a formal notice of 15 days. I think that is abundantly absent in this situation, and the Minister of Justice also, of course, to that end, illuminated and drew their attention back to the provisions of the law with respect to this. And I am very, very sure that the Minister of Justice didn't even know that they will not stop short of going the extent of shutting down the national grid and the hospitals and all other essential staff members. I'm sure that I didn't know. If they had known, maybe if the National Security Advisor had known, they would have
taken steps,
been a bit more stringent in the liberal manner they allow the Labour to take more than it has the power to do. So I feel that to a large extent, in order to forestall things like this from happening in the future, the work doesn't even just stop at the office of the National Security Advisor. It goes back to the Federal Attorney General. There's a pending judgment of the National Industrial Court since June of last year that is preventing the Labour from even going on strike at all. How has that, the matter got to, why do you also feel that, in addition to that, people should be prosecuted?
Well, Justice, we'll get back to you in a moment. Let's hope that we're able to get, the network working well again. So, Tunde, let's come back to you here. Justice has, of course, given credence to what you've said in the studio here, that it does appear, there's some sinister motive. It does appear that what is happening, there is more to it.
I think, like the man has said, I think they just played on the intelligence or the probably liberality of both the NSA and the Attorney General. If we have provided for more far-sighted, you should have known that people like Ajero, since this government started, every other excuse, every other thing, he will go on strike. He will go on strike. It's like a husband who is in the habit of telling the wife, I will divorce you, I will divorce you. One day the woman will stand up to him and say, you are too much. So I think government should be proactive enough. Both the NSA and the Attorney General should have known that these people can go to any extent. They are now taking Nigeria for granted. And the mere fact that you are a labor is just a mini school of Nigeria. We're a very tiny part of 220 million people. You cannot take us for granted at all. Yes, it is normal for you to ask for your rights, but I think the Attorney General and the NSA should also enforce the laws of Nigeria. Yes. Any protest that you do should be within the confines of the law of Nigeria. And Ajaero and Co. cannot claim ignorance of the law, because ignorance is not excuse in the law. They have committed a treasonable offense in which they must be put in the dock. A lot of people have died because of this strike in the hospital.
Yes.
Going to the hospital, you have also no right to ask people to join you in a strike.
No, you can't force people.
You can't force people to
The law is clear.
It's very clear about that. You have no right to force people. So I think that this is a lesson for both the Attorney General, especially the people in charge of security, for some miscreants to just walk to the national grid and shut it down.
All right. But then should we have even gotten to the point of a strike? There are other avenues that could have been explored.
Under Ajaero, strike is usually the first option. And I'm saying that we had governments in the past where you could count on your fingertips in 8 years how many national strikes we had.
Right. I understand justice.
And you are supposed to give a length of time before a strike. You are also supposed to obey the law. Justice was talking about the fact that there is an injunction, you know, at the, what is it called, this court?
The National
Industrial Court, which they've been disobeying, you know. So, and you are supposed to even give, remember Baba Kokori before he died, the last interview that TVC had with him, he said, how do you do a national, you call out, Baba Kokori was a labor leader in his own right, one of the greatest. He said, how do you call a national strike with as little as 3 days notice? That is not done.
There is more to it than this.
All right, let's get Justice. Justice, it's good to have you back. So you were saying something about the subsisting order, you know, which ought to be obeyed.
I say it's my pleasure again. I'm sorry. It can also be the national grid that actually caused the issue. So everybody is just going
All right, so land on your thoughts, and then, you know, we'll talk about...
I don't know where, okay.
You were talking about the, you know, judgment at the National Industrial Court. So let's talk about that, and the fact that should we have even gotten to the point of embarking on strike? Are there no other avenues, alternatives that should have been explored before this economic and paralysis of the entire nation, really?
Okay, for me, like I always say, I tell all my clients and anybody that has ears to hear, no matter the order of court, whether you are comfortable with it or not, you just have to obey it. I'm sure that we may not even be able to use that as a broad strategy because of what's happening in Kano and Rivers State, where people are now being forced to pick and choose between orders of court to obey. And I think that's very, very likely unfortunate, and whatever it is the Chief Justice of Nigeria is doing about that should be sped up and should be really enforced so that we won't have situations where some people are trying to legitimize how to not obey court orders. So that said, with respect to other strategies that can be employed, definitely it is very, very obvious that first, we must admit, and just like BKO and Mr. Baton have said, the labor, they have a right to go on strike. And I also must boldly say that labor is about the only pressure group who can stand up to the federal government as we stand today. The principle of checks and balances, the legislature is not doing it as strong as it ought on the streets. So it may be that, okay, it's only labor that can hold the executive to account. But in holding the executive to account, they must do it within the bounds of the law. I support going on strike fully, but it has to be within the bounds of the law. Because if everybody decides to go outside of the bounds of the law, and just like BKO has also said, we go back to the Obeshan
state of nature.
And nobody is guaranteed to survive except the person that is physically strongest, and of course, when the physically strongest at some point will grow old and die. So we must keep the engagement on. I blame also the government to a large extent. The government didn't have to let it degenerate to this point before we are embarking on strike and on strike and on strike. I heard it from somewhere that every day the economy shuts down, like yesterday and today, we lose about $1.2 billion. I don't know how accurate that is, but if it is by any stretch of imagination accurate, that is humongous. How much is our total economy? Last time I checked, I think it's less than $400 billion. So if we now do this for 50 days or 400 days, I know that it's possible that even the people that seem to be supporting the strike a bit, they will put on labor. And one more thing that labor ought to have done is to be strategic and be wise. Common sense. When people are in their house, you call a strike, you have to let them have power supply so that they will be comfortable in their house. You have to let them, because power supply is also attached to water flow. You must let products flow.
I hear you, Justice. We need to take a moment. We need to take a break. When we come back, we would continue where we stopped. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us on the program. Well, Justice, let's get back to you. Is 1 week grace period adequate to reach a consensus that the tripartite National Minimum Wage Committee couldn't reach in about 5 months? Okay, we'll get back to Justice. Let me bring this to you, Sunday. Well, now Labour has given a 1 week break, and I'm wondering if that time is enough to reach a consensus that they couldn't reach with the committee in charge of this since it was set up in January 2024.
Well, from the actions of Labour since yesterday and from the pronouncements of their leaders, it means they have a preconceived mind. They have made up their mind before going to the negotiation table of what they are going to do. And what I just want to tell all Nigerians is that we are not all illiterates and we are not all ignorant of the law. In as much as I believe that the Labour has every right to ask and to demand from government the rights of Nigerian workers, at the same time, it should be done within the confines of the law, and they should not take Nigerians to ransom. They should not hold us to ransom.
All right, we understand we have a call on Awa Hassan. Thank you very much for joining us. What's your take on what's going on?
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. My take is we need to just understand that these guys are opposition party. Labour is Labour Party. All these things they're doing, they're not doing it for Nigerians. For God's sake, growing up in Kano, if I can remember, and I still remember, if Babangida can remember, when we have strikes like this, the workers will put the light on. In fact, it's during strikes that we have 247 lights, because they will put the light on and leave. It is only when there is a fault that you have issues because they are on strike. But they will never put it off, shut the grid and leave. They don't do that. There have been strikes since we were growing up. The times of ASU strike, and Labour will join ASU and they will strike. We've had such strikes so many times, and no grid has ever been shut until this time. I think we had one, then twice with these people. I have said it so many times that this particular Labour has shown to Nigerians that it is partisan. They campaigned for their party. They own the Labour Party. They are angry that the president is making it, and his intentions are good for this country. So whatever it is they want to do to sabotage this government, they're doing it as opposition party.
All right,
not as people speaking for Nigerians.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
People and you tell them you're fighting for them. They are starving Nigerians when they put off the lights. You can't be putting our lives into misery and you tell us you're fighting for us.
All right, Awa Hassan, thank you for your perspective. I understand Justice is back. Yes. Justice, how hopeful are you that in this 1 week grace period we would reach, do you call it El Dorado now, reach a consensus?
Okay, I will call it truth instead of El Dorado, because just like BKO also said, it will never end. And I also don't pray that it ends. There should always be pressure and resistance, some form of legal resistance to the government. Otherwise, the government will rest on its oars and just be doing exactly, be acting exactly based on its own whims and caprices. So I feel that, yes, I think I'm very, very positive that they know that they are beating more than they can chew, especially with respect to crossing clear a legal red line. And I know that they know if they further play hardball, the Attorney General may now have to take the bull by the horn and actually prosecute them, which I expect the Attorney General to do anyway, whether or not they come to a truce based on this 5-day gap. So I'm just positive that they won't resume this strike.
All right, Justice. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. But based on one of those resolutions reached, I'm wondering what will become of that. No worker would be victimized as a result of the industrial action. But then thank you very much for sharing the legal perspective with us on the program today.
Because agreement is agreement.
Yes.
As BKO always says. You've reached an agreement. Don't you cannot persecute anybody. They were irresponsible in the manner they were beating people just to enforce the strike, clearly against our laws. But what we are saying is never again.
All right,
never again. Don't let anybody get close to shutting down the national grid. Don't victimize them. Right. As you already got into an agreement, so don't go against the agreement. But nobody should be permitted again to put his filthy hand on our national grid and then switch it off. It should not happen again, except if those in government are saying that they are not up to their jobs.
All right. You want to wrap up in about
15
seconds?
And that people should not take Nigerians for granted because they are fighting for their rights. They are not fighting for us when they are punishing us in an unreasonable way.
All right then, gentlemen, it's been so good having you on the program today. Tunde Abato and Babajide Kolade Otutoju. Thank you very much for your thoughts and the expose.